Story 1. I used to work at a luxury hotel that marketed itself as exceeding every expectation. The only thing they exceeded was their markups. For example, we charged $10 for a bottle of water that cost us 50 cents. But the biggest scam? The oceanfront rooms. People paid thousands for a view of the water, but what they got was a sliver of blue between two buildings. If guests complained, management instructed us to respond with, "It's the perfect spot for sunsets." One day, a couple arrived, visibly upset about their premium oceanfront room. They demanded an upgrade. My manager told me to offer them a free drink voucher and promise better luck next visit. The husband wasn't having it. He whipped out a tape measure, showed me the exact distance between the water and their window, and declared, "This is a scam." Management caved and upgraded them, but later I overheard my boss laughing, saying, "They'll still tip." And they did. Story 2. I worked in retail for a trendy clothing brand. Ever notice how everything smells amazing? That's because we sprayed new clothing scent in the air every morning. It's fake. But the real kicker? The clothes labeled as limited edition were just old inventory from last season, repackaged and marked up. One day, a regular customer asked me why a dress in the new arrivals section looked exactly like something she bought 6 months ago. I froze, trying to think of a believable excuse. My manager swooped in and said, "We brought it back by popular demand." The customer bought it again in a different color. She even thanked us for being so in touch with trends. I felt guilty, but my boss gave me a bonus for hitting my sales quota that week. Story 3. I worked at a big tech company in their customer service department. Ever wonder why your warranty doesn't cover anything that goes wrong? That's intentional. We were trained to deny claims based on the vaguest reasons. Cracked screen? That's user damage. Device won't turn on? You must have mishandled it. One customer spent over an hour arguing that their laptop stopped working 2 weeks after buying it, but the warranty was voided because they used a third-party charger. I escalated the issue to my supervisor, hoping they'd approve the replacement. Instead, they said, "Offer them a 10% discount on a new laptop. That's policy." I watched the customer leave, visibly frustrated, only to see an email later from corporate congratulating our team for maximizing revenue retention. Story 4. I worked in the food delivery business for a popular app. Here's the dirty secret. Most of the time, your food isn't late because of traffic. It's because drivers prioritize bigger tips. The app doesn't pay us enough, so we have to hustle for extra cash. One time, I had 2 orders, a $5 tip from a fancy sushi place and no tip from a pizza joint. Guess whose food sat in my car for 30 minutes while I made the sushi delivery? When I finally dropped off the pizza, the customer yelled at me for being late. I wanted to explain, but I just apologized. Later, I saw the app gave me a bad rating and flagged the delivery as unprofessional. Meanwhile, the sushi customer tipped me $20 extra for being prompt. Lesson learned. Always tip your driver. Story 5. I worked for a popular theme park, the kind that prides itself on being the happiest place on earth. Behind the scenes, it's chaos. The costumes for the characters? Barely cleaned. We were told to just Febreze it if there wasn't enough time between shifts. The mascots? They were underpaid actors who worked in 100-degree heat without proper breaks. One day, a kid's ice cream cone spilled on the mascot's foot. Instead of helping, the manager told the actor to stay in character and not react. The kid's mom started yelling at the poor guy in the suit, demanding compensation. The manager swooped in, gave them a free ice cream voucher, and acted like a hero. Meanwhile, the actor got reprimanded for breaking the illusion because he flinched when the ice cream hit him. It was the moment I realized the park wasn't about happiness. It was about profit. I quit a week later. Story 6. I used to work at a movie theater, and here's the secret. The popcorn isn't fresh. It's made in bulk the night before and stored in giant bags. When customers come in, we toss it into the machine to make it look like it's just been popped. One time, someone found a piece of popcorn that was stale and asked for a refund. My manager smirked and told me to explain it was a unique kernel from the batch. The customer actually believed it and bought a larger size instead. Meanwhile, the butter? It's not butter, it's flavored oil. One night after closing, we ran out of pre-popped popcorn for the next day. My manager ordered me to grab bags from last week's batch that were hiding in the back. We sold it all the next day, and no one noticed. That's when I realized people don't pay for quality. They pay for the smell of fresh popcorn. Art. Story 7. I worked for a major airline, and let me tell you, your luggage isn't treated like it's worth anything. We were trained to throw bags onto the conveyor belt as fast as possible, no matter how fragile the tag said it was. One time, a bag actually burst open, and we found expensive camera equipment inside. My supervisor told me to shove everything back in and zip it up tight. When the owner complained, they were told it was likely damaged during TSA screening. Another secret? Those upgrades to first class that cost hundreds? They often go to airline employees flying for free. I once saw a paying customer argue for an upgrade because the seat was empty, but my coworker, who wasn't even on duty, got it instead. The manager told the customer the seat was reserved and left it at that. I never flew with them again after quitting. Story 8. I worked at a major coffee chain that prided itself on being ethical and community-driven. But those custom drinks with 10 ingredients? We hated making them. Orders like a half decaf, extra foam, oat milk macchiato with 3 pumps of vanilla were common, and we were told to act like it was no problem. Meanwhile, behind the counter, it was chaos. One regular customer ordered a 15-ingredient drink every day and then complained if it took longer than 2 minutes. One day, my coworker accidentally handed her a plain latte instead of the monstrosity she ordered. She didn't even notice and said it was perfect as always. We never told her, and she kept coming back for the same plain latte every day. Story 9. I worked in car sales, and the biggest secret is that the limited time deals are never limited. Those ads saying, "Sale ends Sunday?" They just put up a new banner on Monday with a different excuse. One customer came in panicking about the sale ending, so they rushed through the paperwork without reading the fine print. Later, they realized they'd agreed to a $2,000 dealer fee. The worst part? My manager would brag about these tactics in meetings, calling them closing strategies. One day, a family came in, looking for an affordable used car. My manager intentionally misquoted the price to get them excited, then acted shocked when the financing paperwork showed a higher number. The family looked so defeated, but they signed anyway. I quit soon after. Tonete. Story 10. I worked for a high-end furniture store where everything was handcrafted and sustainable. The truth? Most of the items were made in bulk overseas and shipped with handcrafted stickers slapped on the boxes. One day, a customer asked about a $5,000 dining table and wanted to know what kind of wood it was made from. My manager whispered, "If they're asking, just say it's walnut. Everyone loves walnut." Spoiler, it wasn't walnut. It was particle board with a veneer. The customer paid full price, and my manager celebrated with champagne in the back office. Meanwhile, I saw the same table listed online by another company for a fraction of the price. That's when I realized people don't buy furniture. They buy the illusion of luxury. Story 11. I worked at a major pet store chain, and here's the secret. Those adorable animals in the store? Most of them aren't cared for properly. We were understaffed and trained to prioritize cleaning the areas customers could see. The animals in the back? Neglected. One time, a customer asked if the hamsters on display were healthy because one was lying still in the corner. I knew that hamster had probably been sick for days, but my manager told me to say, "It's just napping." A week later, that same customer came back and said the hamster they bought had passed away. The manager blamed transition stress and offered a replacement for full price. I spent the rest of the day wondering why I worked there. Story 12. I used to work in an office supply store, and let me tell you, printer ink is the biggest scam. It's more expensive than champagne by volume, and half the time, the printers don't even need it when they claim they're empty. The cartridges are designed to force you to buy more. One time, a customer came in, furious that their brand new printer wouldn't work. The screen said it was out of ink, but the cartridge was still nearly full. My manager told me to upsell them on a premium ink refill, saying it would prevent future issues. In reality, all I did was reset the printer settings. They paid $60 for me to press a few buttons. Story 13. I worked at a call center for a major internet provider. Ever wonder why they always try to upsell you instead of solving your issue? That's because we were graded on sales, not service. If your internet was down, we were told to recommend an upgraded package instead of fixing the problem. One day, a customer called, furious that their internet had been out for 3 days. I saw the issue could be fixed with a simple reset, but my supervisor interrupted and told me to say, "Upgrading to our premium service will prioritize your connection." They paid an extra $20 a month for the same internet they already had. When I pointed out how unethical it was, my supervisor said, "Welcome to business." Ta-ta. Story 14. I worked for a big box electronics store, and the extended warranties are a total scam. They make it sound like a safety net, but most claims are denied due to user error. Once, a customer came in with a broken laptop they'd bought with a warranty. The screen was cracked, and they were told it wasn't covered because physical damage isn't included. The customer argued that they bought the warranty specifically for accidents. My manager smiled and said, "It only covers manufacturer defects." They left without a refund, but later I found out the warranty profits are split between the store and corporate. So, of course, we were told to sell as many as possible, even if they rarely paid out. Story 15. I worked in the wedding industry, and here's the ugly truth. Everything costs more because the word wedding is attached to it. Flowers that normally cost $300 suddenly become $1,500. A cake that would feed 10 people? Add a zero if it's for a wedding. One time, a bride asked why her centerpiece quote was so high. My boss told me to say, "It's the premium quality we offer for special events." The truth? It was the same supplier we used for corporate events at a fraction of the price. The bride ended up paying $5,000 for flowers that would have cost $800 for any other occasion. After seeing enough people get ripped off, I left the industry for good. 2016, I worked for a high-end spa, the kind that charges hundreds for exclusive treatments. What no one tells you? Half the ingredients in the fancy products are just repackaged drugstore items. One day, a customer asked why our $200 facial cream looked and smelled exactly like something they saw at a pharmacy. My manager quickly jumped in and said, "It's similar, but ours has a unique proprietary formula." Spoiler, it didn't. Once, during a slow week, my manager had us refill our exclusive exfoliant jars with bulk scrub from a warehouse store. Customers still raved about how their skin felt so much softer after the treatments. That's when I realized they weren't paying for quality. They were paying to feel pampered. Story 17. I used to work at a luxury car dealership. Here's the deal. Those certified pre-owned vehicles that cost tens of thousands? They're often barely inspected. The 125-point check we advertised? It was usually just the basics: oil change, tire pressure, and a quick wash. One time, we sold a car with a faulty air conditioning system that we knew about but didn't fix because it wasn't covered under the pre-owned certification. The customer brought it back a week later, furious. My manager told them it must have been damaged after they bought it and offered a discounted repair for $2,000. They paid it, thinking they were getting a deal. Meanwhile, the repair cost us $200. Story 18. I worked at a major grocery store chain, and the fresh-baked bread wasn't fresh or baked. It came frozen, and we just popped it in the oven to make it smell like a bakery. The same goes for most of the deli items, which were pre-cooked and reheated. One time, a customer asked if our rotisserie chicken was made fresh that day. I told them yes, but in reality, it had been cooked the night before and reheated in the morning. When I asked my manager why we couldn't be honest, they said, "People don't buy food, they buy the story behind it." I started questioning every fresh label after that. E. Story 19. I worked for a cleaning service that specialized in deep cleanse for homes. What they don't tell you is that most of the cleaning products we used were cheap and watered down to save costs. One day, a client complained about stains on their carpet, so my manager handed me a bottle of plain water and said, "Spray this and tell them it's our premium solution. They'll never know." To my disbelief, the client was thrilled, saying, "This is the cleanest my house has ever been." After that, I realized it wasn't about the results. It was about making the client believe we were miracle workers. I left soon after, but I still laugh about the premium solution trick. Egg. Story 20. I worked at a high-profile charity organization, and here's the dirty secret. Most donations don't go where you think they do. A huge chunk goes to administrative costs and advertising. One time, I asked why we spent so much on fancy brochures instead of the programs we were supposed to fund. My boss said, "We need to spend money to make money." I'll never forget when a donor gave $10,000, asking if it could help fund a specific program for kids. My manager smiled and assured them it would. Later, I found out most of it went toward catering an internal fundraiser for wealthy donors. That's when I knew the charity cared more about appearances than impact. 21. I worked at a popular fast food chain, and here's the truth. The grilled chicken isn't grilled. It's pre-cooked in factories and shipped frozen. The grill marks, those are added during processing. One day, a customer asked if the chicken was freshly grilled, and my manager told me to say, "It's prepared fresh every day." Technically true, since we microwaved it daily. The worst part, if the chicken didn't sell by the end of the day, we were told to refrigerate it and serve it the next day as freshly prepared. It made me wonder how many people ate 2-day-old chicken, thinking they were being healthy. I couldn't eat there again after I quit. Story 22. I worked for a popular cosmetics company, and the secret is that most of the anti-aging claims are total nonsense. The ingredients are the same as in regular moisturizers, but the price is marked up by 300%. One day, a customer asked if a $200 cream was really better than the $20 version. My manager told me to say, "It's scientifically proven to reduce fine lines." The science was a study funded by our own company. Once I accidentally used the cheaper version on a demo instead of the expensive one. The customer was thrilled with the results and bought 2 jars of the pricey stuff. My manager high-fived me saying, "Perception is everything." Story 23. I used to work in a hospital billing department, and let me tell you, those itemized bills are a joke. One time, a patient was charged $40 for a single Tylenol pill. When they questioned it, my supervisor explained, "It includes administrative costs." Another patient was billed $1,000 for using a blanket during their stay. I asked why we couldn't just bill patients for what they actually used. My boss shrugged and said, "Because insurance companies will pay it." The saddest part? People who didn't have insurance were stuck paying those insane prices out of pocket. It made me sick to see people go into debt for basic care. Story 24. I worked for a subscription box company, the kind that delivers curated products to your door. The truth? Most of the items were overstocked junk from brands that couldn't sell them in stores. One month, we advertised exclusive, high-quality skincare products. In reality, we got them for pennies from a liquidation sale. One customer wrote in, thrilled about how luxurious the products felt. Meanwhile, I knew the same items were being sold at a discount store for $5. My manager laughed and said, "As long as they think it's exclusive, we're golden." It made me realize the entire business was built on perception, not quality. Story 25. I worked in the insurance industry, and here's a secret. Adjusters are trained to find reasons to deny claims. One time, a family filed a claim after a fire destroyed their home. Everything seemed straightforward until my boss noticed a small discrepancy in their paperwork. He used it as a reason to deny the claim, saving the company tens of thousands of dollars. When I asked if we could reconsider, he said, "It's their responsibility to read the fine print." The family ended up hiring a lawyer, but by then, they'd already lost so much. It made me realize that the system wasn't designed to help people. It was designed to protect profits. Story 26. I worked for a popular online retail company, and here's a secret. Most next-day shipping promises are a lie. We intentionally mark orders as shipped, even if they're still sitting in the warehouse. It's a psychological trick to keep customers happy. One time, a customer called asking why their package hadn't moved from the label-created stage for 3 days. My manager told me to blame the carrier, even though I knew we hadn't even sent it out. The customer apologized for being impatient, and I felt terrible. Meanwhile, the warehouse team joked that next day meant next week, if they felt like it. Story 27. I used to work at a chain daycare center, and the low child-to-staff ratio they advertise? It's a joke. We were constantly overbooked and understaffed, which meant kids barely got any individual attention. One day, a parent asked if their child was doing okay because they seemed quiet lately. I wanted to tell them the truth, that their kid spent most of the day sitting alone while we scrambled to handle the chaos. Instead, I was told to reassure them by saying, "They're adjusting beautifully." Behind the scenes, the staff was exhausted, and management refused to hire more people because it would hurt profits. I quit when I realized the kids deserved so much better than what we could give them. Story 28. I worked for a big-name phone company, and those unlimited data plans? They're not really unlimited. Once you hit a certain threshold, your speeds are throttled to the point where you can barely load a web page. One time, a customer called asking why their internet was so slow. They were on the highest tier plan and had just paid their bill. My manager told me to explain that they'd used their priority data, which is just a fancy way of saying they'd been throttled. The customer asked if paying more would fix it. My manager happily upsold them on a more expensive plan, one that throttled at a slightly higher limit. I hated every second of that job. Story 29. I worked at a high-end jewelry store, and here's the dirty secret. Those one-of-a-kind pieces? Most of them come from catalogs that dozens of other stores also use. One day, a customer came in looking for an engagement ring and was drawn to a unique design. They wanted to make sure it was something no one else would have. My manager assured them it was exclusively crafted for our store, which wasn't remotely true. Later, I found the same ring listed on a competitor's website for half the price. When I pointed it out to my boss, they just shrugged and said, "It's about the experience, not the product." Tiens. Story 30. I worked for a luxury travel agency, and let me tell you, those personalized itineraries are mostly copy-pasted. We had a template for every destination, and the custom recommendations were just recycled suggestions. One time, a wealthy client paid thousands for a tailor-made trip to Europe. My coworker accidentally sent them an itinerary meant for someone else. The client didn't notice and emailed back saying it was exactly what they envisioned. My manager laughed and said, "See, they don't want custom. They want confirmation they have good taste." It made me realize how much of luxury travel is just a well-packaged illusion. Story 31. I worked for a major home improvement store. And here's the secret. Those lifetime warranties on tools? They're designed to frustrate you into giving up on replacements. We were trained to make the process as slow and confusing as possible. One customer brought in a broken drill that was supposed to be covered under the warranty. My manager told me to explain that they needed the original receipt, even though the system could pull it up. When the customer came back with the receipt, we said they also needed the original packaging. After 3 trips, they finally gave up and bought a new drill. My manager called it a win. Story 32. I worked in event catering, and here's the truth. Those beautiful buffets at weddings, they're all about cutting corners. We reused leftover food whenever possible. One time, we catered a high-profile wedding where the guests barely touched the hors d'oeuvre. My boss told us to repurpose the untouched ones for a corporate event the next day. The kicker? We still charged both clients full price for freshly prepared food. I once asked why we couldn't just donate the extras instead of reusing them. My boss said, "It's not about waste, it's about maximizing profit." I started bringing leftovers home just so they wouldn't go to waste. Chunks. Story 33. I worked at a mattress store, and here's a fun fact. Those sleep trials where you can return the mattress if you don't like it? Returned mattresses are often just rewrapped and sold as new. We called it factory refurbished, but in reality, they were barely cleaned. One day, a customer came in to exchange a mattress that didn't feel right. My manager had us put it back on the floor, and it sold to someone else the same week. When I asked if that was legal, my manager said, "If they don't ask, we don't tell." After that, I could never look at brand new mattresses the same way. Story 34. I worked for a popular sportswear brand, and here's the deal. Most of the cutting-edge fabrics we advertised were just regular polyester with fancy names. We'd add a flashy label like performance mesh and charge double. One time, a customer asked why our $100 workout leggings were so much more expensive than similar ones at a discount store. My manager smiled and said, "Ours are designed for athletes." Truthfully, the discount leggings were made in the same factory as ours, sometimes with better stitching. We were just selling the logo and the story. Isanito 35. I worked at a big pharmaceutical company, and here's something you won't see in ads. Those breakthrough drugs? They're often just reformulated versions of older medications. One day, we launched a new allergy pill that was hyped as more effective. In reality, it was the same active ingredient as the old version, but with a time-release coating. We sold it for triple the price, claiming it lasted longer. Doctors were encouraged to prescribe it, and patients believed they were getting something revolutionary. When I brought this up to my supervisor, they said, "Innovation isn't about what's new, it's about what sells." That's when I realized the industry cared more about profits than patients. Story 36. I worked at a trendy health food store, and here's the truth. Most of the organic labels don't mean much. We stocked regular produce next to organic versions from the same supplier, but with different stickers and higher prices. One day, a customer asked why our organic apples looked identical to the regular ones. My manager jumped in and said, "Organic farming is all about the process, not the look." Behind the scenes, we knew they were from the same farm, but the organic ones were marked up by 40%. When I asked why we couldn't just be honest, my manager shrugged and said, "People pay for peace of mind, not reality." Story 37. I worked at a car rental agency, and here's the secret. Those free upgrades they offer, they're not free. If you don't specifically say no, they add hidden charges to your final bill. One time, a customer was thrilled about getting a complimentary SUV upgrade. When they returned the car, they noticed an extra $150 on their receipt. My manager explained it was for optional insurance, which they never asked for. The customer demanded a refund, but my manager refused, saying, "You signed the agreement." I left that job feeling like we conned people daily. Story 38. I used to work for a subscription streaming service, and here's a dirty secret. They intentionally throttle your streaming quality during peak hours to save bandwidth. Customers who pay for the highest tier plans don't get what they're promised. One day, a customer called, furious that their 4K movie kept buffering. My manager told me to explain it was an issue with their internet provider, even though I could see on my screen that their connection was fine. When I asked why we couldn't just upgrade our servers, my manager said, "It's cheaper to let them blame their Wi-Fi." Story 39. I worked in a popular bookstore chain, and those staff picks displays? They're not curated by employees. Corporate sends a list of books they want to promote, and we're told to pretend we love them. One time, a customer asked me what I liked about a specific staff pick novel. I hadn't even read it, but I was trained to say, it's a real page-turner with unforgettable characters. The truth? The publisher had paid to have their book featured. I started sneaking my actual favorites onto the shelf, just so customers wouldn't feel duped. Story 40. I worked at a luxury fitness club, and here's the catch. Most of the expensive equipment is leased, not owned. When something breaks, it takes forever to fix because we have to wait for the leasing company to handle repairs. One time, a treadmill was out of order for over a month, and a member complained. My manager told me to say, "We're upgrading our machines to enhance your experience." In reality, we were just waiting for a cheap repair. Meanwhile, members kept paying full price for amenities they couldn't even use. It made me wonder how many other luxury clubs cut corners like that. Story 41. I worked for a big-name hotel chain, and here's the secret. Those complimentary upgrades you get, they're usually rooms no one else wanted. Once, we upgraded a couple to a luxury suite that had been under maintenance the week before because of a lingering plumbing issue. The guests called down an hour later, complaining about a weird smell in the bathroom. My manager told me to say, "It's just part of the building's charm." They didn't buy it and demanded another room. But by then, everything else was booked. My manager sent up an air freshener and called it a day. Story 42. I worked at a chain pharmacy, and here's a little-known fact. The store brand medications are often made by the same companies that make the name brands. The only difference? The label and the price. One time, a customer asked if the generic cold medicine was as effective as the name brand. My manager told me to say, "It's a budget-friendly alternative, but the name brand is premium." The truth? They were identical, right down to the ingredients. The customer bought the name brand, and my manager congratulated me on upselling. Story 43. I worked in the advertising department for a major snack company, and here's the truth. The low-calorie versions of your favorite snacks aren't actually healthier. We just make the servings smaller. One time, a coworker pointed out that the diet-friendly chips had almost the same calorie count as the regular ones if you ate the same amount. Our boss laughed and said, "It's all about perception. People will feel better about themselves if we tell them it's healthier." I started reading the fine print on every package after that. 54. I worked for a moving company, and the biggest scam? Charging by weight. We'd intentionally overestimate the weight of furniture because most customers had no way to verify it. One day, a family was quoted $3,000 for their move, but when I looked at the inventory, I knew it should have been closer to $2,000. My boss told me to stick to the estimate because customers expect it to be expensive. The family paid without questioning it, and my boss pocketed the difference as a bonus. 45. I worked in a popular chain gym, and here's the dirty secret. Those free personal training sessions? They're just a sales pitch. Trainers are instructed to exaggerate your weaknesses to make you feel like you need their help. One time, a trainer told the client their form was so bad it could cause permanent damage if they didn't buy sessions. The client, visibly panicked, signed up for a $1,500 package. Later, I saw that trainer laughing about how easy it was to scare people into spending money. It made me question everything about the fitness industry. 46. I worked at a popular home goods store, and here's a secret. Those big clearance sections? They're not always discounted. We'd move full-price items there just to make them look like a deal. One time, a customer brought up a $50 lamp from the clearance rack and was thrilled about the discount. When I scanned it, it came up full price. My manager told me to say, "The sale applies at checkout," but nothing changed when I rang it up. The customer still bought it, convinced they were getting a bargain. I couldn't bring myself to shop there after I quit. Chato. Story 47. I worked for a big retail pharmacy, and the secret is, the price you pay for medications often has nothing to do with the actual cost. Once, a customer's insurance didn't cover their prescription, and the price jumped from $15 to $200. When I looked it up, the actual cost to the store was only $5. I asked my manager why we couldn't just sell it at cost. He laughed and said, "That's not how the business works. They'll pay if they need it." Watching people struggle to afford basic medicine broke my heart. Story 48. I worked in a fast fashion clothing store, and here's something you won't want to hear. Those limited collections are often just unsold stock from previous seasons. We dye a jacket a different color or slap on a new label and call it exclusive. One time, a customer told me they'd seen a nearly identical dress at another store for half the price. My manager told me to say, "Ours has better quality stitching," which wasn't true. They still bought it, saying, "I trust this brand more." I realized then that loyalty often outweighs logic. Tuck. Story 49. I worked for a delivery service, and here's the truth. When your package says delayed due to weather, it's probably sitting in a warehouse. Once we were behind schedule, and my manager told us to mark every late delivery as a weather delay, even though it was a sunny day. A customer called confused because they lived 5 minutes from the warehouse and the weather was perfect. My manager told me to say, there were regional disruptions. The package sat there for another 2 days before we delivered it. I felt terrible knowing people were being lied to for the sake of convenience. Story 50. I worked at a major electronics retailer, and the premium HDMI cables we sold? Total ripoff. We charged $80 for a cable that cost the store less than $5 to stock. One time, a customer asked why they needed the premium version instead of the $10 one. My manager said, "The quality is significantly better," which wasn't true. I later tested both cables at home, and there was no difference at all. When I told my manager, he said, "It's not about the product, it's about the pitch." Watching people waste money on something unnecessary made me question the entire business model. 51. I worked for a popular online fashion retailer, and here's the truth. A lot of the new arrivals aren't new at all. They're returns from other customers, repackaged and resold. One time, I opened the return box, and the dress inside clearly had deodorant stains. My manager said, "Just steam it and tag it as new." A week later, I saw the same dress featured in a customer's glowing review online. They called it perfectly fresh and crisp. I felt guilty knowing it had been worn before, but my manager told me, if they're happy, who cares? Story 52. I worked in corporate sales for a big tech company, and here's the scam. Those tailored solutions we offered businesses, they were just overpriced bundles of the same products we sold to regular consumers. One client asked why they were being charged double for services they didn't even need. My boss told me to explain that it was optimized for enterprise use, which was just code for extra expensive. The client reluctantly signed the contract, and my boss celebrated hitting his bonus target. It felt like we were robbing people in suits instead of ski masks. Story 53. I worked at a chain furniture store, and the truth is, a lot of the solid wood pieces are actually particle board with a thin wood veneer. One day, a customer asked me why their $800 coffee table felt so light. My manager told me to say, "It's designed for easy mobility," when the real reason was it wasn't solid wood at all. That same customer came back a few months later, complaining that the veneer was peeling. My manager refused to honor the warranty, claiming it was user damage. Watching them leave disappointed made me question every product we sold. General. Story 54. I worked for a large grocery chain, and here's a little secret. Those handmade cakes in the bakery? They come frozen and pre-decorated. All we did was add a few finishing touches. One time, a customer ordered a custom cake for their kid's birthday, and asked if it could be made fresh that morning. My manager said, "Of course," and pulled a frozen cake from the back, thawed it, and added the kid's name in frosting. The customer raved about how perfectly baked it was, and I realized people just wanted the illusion of freshness. Story 55. I worked at a theme park, and here's a dirty secret. The maintenance schedule for rides isn't as rigorous as you'd hope. Once, a roller coaster broke down, and instead of properly fixing it, we were told to patch it up and get it running again. A few days later, the same ride stalled with passengers stuck at the top for hours. My manager told me to reassure guests that routine testing was being performed, but I knew it was just another temporary fix. After seeing how many corners were cut, I stopped riding any of the attractions myself. Story 56. I worked for a major chain coffee shop, and here's the truth. The limited-time seasonal drinks aren't limited at all. The ingredients are available year-round, but we only market them during certain months to create hype. One time, a customer asked if we could make their favorite winter drink in July. My manager said, "Tell them it's impossible," even though the syrup was literally in the back. Later, I made the drink for them anyway, and they tipped me $10 saying, "I wish corporate wasn't so strict." Little did they know, it was all about driving demand. Story 57. I worked at a big-name department store, and those doorbuster deals on Black Friday? They're often fake discounts. We'd raise prices the week before, then slap on a 50% off tag to make it look like a huge sale. One year, a customer showed me a screenshot of the same TV on sale 2 weeks earlier for less than the Black Friday price. My manager told me to say, "That must have been a pricing error." The customer still bought it, convinced they were getting a deal. It was the day I realized most sales are just psychological tricks. Good song. Story 58. I worked at a popular fast casual restaurant, and the freshly prepared soups? They came frozen in giant plastic bags. We'd heat them up and pour them into pots to make it look like they were made in-house. One day, a customer complimented me on how homey the soup tasted and asked if the recipe was a secret. My manager said, "Tell them it's made from scratch daily." I couldn't bring myself to lie, so I just smiled and said, "It's a company recipe." They left happy, but I left that job soon after. Story 59. I worked for a major travel booking site, and here's a scam. Those exclusive deals you see on hotels? They're often just the standard rates with a fake discount added. One day, a customer called, thrilled about a 30% off deal they'd found. When I checked, the price was exactly the same as booking directly with the hotel. My manager told me to say, "Our partnerships allow us to offer unmatched savings." The customer believed it, and I realized how easy it was to manipulate people with made-up percentages. Story 60. I worked for a popular online grocery delivery service, and here's the catch. The hand-picked by experts produce is often whatever we can grab quickly. We were timed on how fast we could shop, not on quality. One time, I sent a customer bruised bananas because it was all that was left, and my manager said, "They'll complain, and we'll refund them. It's cheaper than wasting time looking for better ones." Sure enough, the customer wrote in about the poor quality and got a $5 credit. Meanwhile, I was praised for efficiency. Story 61. I worked at a luxury eyewear store, and here's the truth. Those designer frames that cost hundreds of dollars, they're made in the same factories as cheaper brands, just with a logo slapped on. One day, a customer asked why their $400 glasses felt so flimsy. My manager said, "The lightweight design is part of the premium experience." In reality, they were paying for the name, not the quality. Meanwhile, I knew they could have gotten the same pair, minus the logo, for $50 online. Story 62. I worked in a tech startup that offered free trials for its software. The catch? Canceling was intentionally made difficult. We hid the cancel option deep in the settings and required customers to call us to finalize it. One time, a customer complained that they'd been charged after trying to cancel online. My manager told me to say, "It must have been a system error," even though I knew it was designed that way. Watching people pay for something they didn't want made me realize how shady the entire business model was. Story 63. I worked at a high-end furniture rental company, and here's a secret. The gently used pieces we rented out, many of them were heavily damaged and just covered up. Once, a couch was returned with a huge stain, and instead of replacing it, my boss had us flip the cushion and deliver it to the next customer. The client later called, complaining about a weird smell. My boss told me to say, "It must be the cleaning solution we use." They kept the couch, and we avoided spending money on repairs. Story 64. I worked for a subscription box service, and here's the scam. Those exclusive items we promised? They were cheap bulk goods with custom branding slapped on them. One month we sent out luxury candles that we claimed were handmade by a local artisan. In reality, they were mass-produced in a factory overseas. A customer wrote in, saying how much they loved the personal touch, and my manager replied with, "Thank you for supporting small businesses." I felt like I was part of a giant lie. The Sunny 65. I worked at a theme park known for its magical experiences. But here's the truth. The employees in character costumes, most of them aren't trained actors. They're just whoever fits the suit. One day, a family asked the mascot to do their kid's favorite dance. The employee inside had no idea what they were talking about, so they just waved awkwardly. The kid cried, and the parents complained. My manager told me to say, "Our performers rotate frequently to keep things fresh." Watching the family walk away, disappointed, made me realize the magic was just an illusion. 66. I worked at a large chain grocery store, and here's a dirty secret. The freshly baked pies in the bakery? They're delivered frozen and reheated in store. One time, a customer complimented me on how delicious the pie crust was and asked if it was a family recipe. My manager whispered, "Just say it's made fresh daily," while unboxing more frozen pies in the back. It wasn't just the pies. Most of the baked goods were pre-made. Watching people gush about the homemade quality made me realize they weren't paying for the food. They were paying for the illusion of freshness. Story 67. I worked for a popular streaming platform, and here's a scam. When a show is labeled as exclusive, it often isn't. We'd buy distribution rights to older shows and market them as if they were produced just for us. One time, a subscriber called asking why an exclusive series was also available on another platform. My manager told me to explain it was a shared licensing agreement. The customer said, "So it's not exclusive?" My manager just shrugged and said, "It's exclusive to our branding." Story 68. I worked at a luxury pet store that sold high-end pet food. The truth? Many of the specialty brands we carried were made in the same factories as the budget options. One day, a customer asked why a $60 bag of dog food had the same ingredients as a $20 bag from a regular store. My manager told me to say, "Our brand sources higher quality ingredients." It wasn't true. The only difference was the packaging. The customer still bought it, saying, "My dog deserves the best." I couldn't help but feel guilty knowing they were paying for a label, not better nutrition. So, Story 69. I worked for a big-name home cleaning service, and here's the secret. Most of the cleaners we used were watered-down versions of what you'd find at the store. Once, a client complained that their countertops didn't feel clean, and my manager told me to grab some water, add a bit of soap, and reapply it. When the client came back to check, they said, "Now it's perfect." My manager said, "See, it's all about perception." I realized most people weren't paying for cleanliness. They were paying for the appearance of it. 370. I worked for a major airline, and here's a secret. When flights are overbooked, we deliberately bump passengers with the cheapest tickets first. One time, a family with young kids was told they'd have to take a later flight because the plane was full. The father argued, saying they'd booked months in advance. My manager told me to say, seating is based on availability at check-in. In reality, we prioritized business travelers and frequent flyers who paid more. Watching that family sit in the terminal for hours made me question how customer service was defined in the airline industry. Story 71. I worked for a high-end catering company, and here's a dirty secret. The locally sourced ingredients we advertised, most of them came from wholesale distributors. One time, a client requested a menu featuring only local produce, and my manager agreed enthusiastically. Behind the scenes, we just ordered everything from the same national supplier and slapped locally sourced on the menu. When I asked why we couldn't just use actual local farms, my manager said, "It's too expensive and they'll never know the difference." The clients praised the food, calling it so fresh and authentic, while I stood there biting my tongue. Story 72. I worked at a major retail chain, and those extended warranties we sold, they were almost pure profit. We were trained to upsell them by saying, "It'll protect you from expensive repairs." But the truth? Most claims were denied for reasons buried in the fine print. One time, a customer brought back a broken blender they'd purchased with a warranty. My manager denied the claim, saying, "It doesn't cover electrical issues." The customer looked defeated, but didn't fight back. Later, my manager laughed, saying, "Warranties are the easiest money we make." I couldn't believe how openly we took advantage of people. Story 73. I worked at a luxury car wash, and here's the truth. Those special treatments we offered for an extra $50, most of them were things we already did for free. One day, a customer paid for an exclusive wax treatment, which was literally the same wax we used on every car. After the car was finished, the customer walked out saying, "It looks amazing, totally worth it." My manager gave me a thumbs up and said, "People love paying for exclusivity." It made me wonder how many other industries ran on the same principle. Story 74. I worked for a chain fitness center, and here's a little known fact. Most of the equipment is outdated and barely maintained. Once, a treadmill broke down, and instead of fixing it properly, my manager had us use duct tape to keep it running. A few days later, a member complained that the treadmill felt unstable. My manager told me to say, "We're awaiting a part for an upgrade." It wasn't true. The company just didn't want to spend money on repairs. After seeing how many safety shortcuts were taken, I quit and joined a smaller gym where things actually worked. Story 75. I worked at a major phone repair shop, and here's the scam. We often upsold people on repairs they didn't need. One day, a customer came in with a phone that just needed a simple screen replacement. My manager insisted we tell them the internal hardware might also be damaged, so they agreed to an additional $200 diagnostic. After the repair, my coworker said there was nothing wrong with the hardware, but at least we hit our sales target. Watching people get scammed for basic repairs made me realize I couldn't stay in that job much longer. 76. I worked at a popular fast food chain, and here's a secret. The limited time menu items are often just recycled versions of old ones. One time, we brought back a new burger that had been discontinued years ago. The only difference? A slight change to the sauce recipe. A customer asked what made it new, and my manager said, "We've enhanced the flavor profile for a more modern palate." In reality, it was the same burger we used to sell, just rebranded. Watching customers get excited about something so recycled made me realize marketing is everything. Moti 77. I worked in hotel housekeeping, and here's the truth. Those deep cleaned rooms you're promised? They're often rushed if we're short on time. Once, I was asked to clean a room in under 15 minutes because the next guest was already waiting. I barely had time to change the sheets and wipe down surfaces, let alone sanitize properly. My manager told me, "Just make it look clean. Guests don't inspect every corner." The next guest checked in, raving about how spotless the room was. I felt terrible knowing they were sleeping on a barely cleaned bed. Story 78. I worked at a popular theme park, and here's something they don't tell you. Most of the souvenirs sold as exclusive to the park are available online for half the price. One time, a guest asked if a $50 stuffed animal was really a park-exclusive item. My manager told me to say, "You won't find this anywhere else." Later, I saw the same toy on a major retailer's website for $20. Guests paid more because they believed in the exclusivity, and the park profited off their trust. Story 79. I worked at a big-name coffee chain, and here's the truth. Most of the milk alternatives we charge extra for cost less than regular milk. A customer once asked why they had to pay extra for oat milk when it was supposedly better for the environment. My manager said, "It's about covering costs," which wasn't true. Later, I did the math and realized we were making a huge profit margin on every alternative milk order. Watching customers pay extra for something that should have been standard made me feel like we were nickel and diming people for no reason. Tita. Story 80. I worked at a popular electronics retailer, and here's the scam. We were told to push extended warranties on every product, even ones that almost never broke. Once, a customer bought a $10 pair of headphones, and my manager insisted I sell them a $5 warranty. The customer asked if the headphones were likely to break, and my manager jumped in, saying, "It's always better to be safe than sorry." The headphones probably cost less than $1 to make, and the warranty was pure profit. I couldn't believe how openly we exploited people's fears. Story 81. I worked at a fast casual restaurant, and here's the truth. The freshly prepared salads are anything but fresh. Most of the ingredients are pre-cut and shipped to us in vacuum-sealed bags. One day, a customer asked why their lettuce looked wilted. My manager told me to say, "It's farm fresh and unprocessed, so it naturally varies." The reality? The bagged lettuce had been sitting in our fridge for over a week. They still ate it, praising how healthy it tasted, and I realized people believe whatever the menu says. Story 82. I worked at a chain home improvement store, and here's a scam. The free consultations we advertised for remodeling projects, they were just sales pitches designed to upsell customers on overpriced services. One couple came in for a free kitchen consultation, and my manager pushed them toward a $25,000 remodel package. They only wanted new countertops, but by the end, they'd agreed to the full package after my manager convinced them it was the best value. Watching people spend more than they needed made me feel like I was part of a con. Story 83. I worked in customer support for a tech company, and here's a secret. When we tell you we'll escalate your issue, it often just means we're stalling. Once, a customer called in with a serious software problem, and I was told to promise them a resolution within 48 hours. In reality, we didn't even have a team to handle their issue. My supervisor said, "Just keep them waiting. They'll eventually give up or accept a partial refund." The customer called back 3 days later, furious, and I had to repeat the same script. It made me realize how little companies care once they've got your money. Tut. Story 84. I worked at a luxury skincare store, and here's the truth. Most of the products are marked up by hundreds of %. One day, a customer asked why a $200 serum had the same ingredients as a $20 drugstore brand. My manager said, "Our products are sourced from the purest origins." Later, I found out our serums were made in the same factory as the drugstore brand, with nearly identical formulas. The only difference was the fancy packaging. Watching people spend hundreds on products that weren't special made me question the entire beauty industry. Story 85. I worked at a popular ride-sharing company, and here's the catch. Drivers get penalized for canceling rides, but customers don't. This leads to situations where a driver will sit in traffic for 20 minutes, only for the customer to cancel without warning. Once, I heard a customer brag about ordering rides just to see which car looked the best before canceling. Meanwhile, drivers were forced to take the hit on their ratings and earnings. When I brought this up to my manager, they said, "Customers are the priority. They bring the money." It made me realize how skewed the system was against the people actually doing the work. Story 86. I worked at a major clothing retailer, and here's the truth. Those limited edition collections? They're planned years in advance and mass-produced. Once, we marketed a line as exclusive, but I saw the exact same pieces in the clearance section 6 months earlier under a different name. A customer asked what made the collection so special, and my manager said, "It's inspired by the latest trends." In reality, it was just old stock with a new label. Watching people pay extra for what was essentially recycled inventory made me realize how much of fashion is just clever marketing. Story 87. I worked in a restaurant that prided itself on farm-to-table ingredients. But here's the catch. Most of our produce came from the same bulk suppliers as every other place. One day, a guest complimented the freshly picked tomatoes in their salad, and my manager whispered, "Those are from a can." When I asked why we couldn't be honest, my manager laughed and said, "People eat the story, not the food." It made me question how many other restaurants sell illusions instead of meals. Story 88. I worked at a luxury car rental company, and here's a scam. Most of the premium upgrades we sold were just minor features rebranded to sound fancy. One time, a customer paid extra for a car with enhanced comfort seating. The only difference? We adjusted the lumbar support. The customer was thrilled, saying the car felt so much more luxurious. My manager smiled and said, "It's all about perception." Watching people pay hundreds for tiny tweaks made me realize how much money is made on meaningless upsells. Emoji. Story 89. I worked for a home cleaning app, and here's a little secret. Those background checks we advertised for cleaners, they weren't as thorough as we claimed. Once, a cleaner accidentally broke a client's expensive vase, and the client asked if the cleaner was insured. My manager told me to say, "All our cleaners are thoroughly vetted," even though we barely verified their references. The cleaner wasn't insured, and the client had to pay for the damages themselves. I quit after realizing how much trust we were exploiting. Story 90. I worked for a popular delivery service, and here's a truth that might ruin your appetite. Drivers often don't have insulated bags, even though the company claims they do. One time, I delivered a pizza after it had been sitting in my car for over an hour because the app double-booked me. The customer complained it was cold, and my manager told me to blame unexpected traffic. Watching people pay extra for priority delivery, only to get food that wasn't even warm, made me question the integrity of the entire service. Story 91. I worked at a high-end jewelry store, and here's the scam. Those certified diamonds we sold at premium prices, they were often the same quality as much cheaper ones sold elsewhere. The certification just came from a third-party service we paid to make the stones seem more valuable. One customer asked why a diamond at our store was double the price of one they'd seen online. My manager told me to say, "Our diamonds undergo stricter grading standards." The truth? Both diamonds were identical in quality, but our brand name let us charge more. Story 92. I worked for a big tech company that advertised secure cloud storage. But here's the truth. Your files aren't as private as you think. Once, I saw a customer's account flagged for suspicious activity. Instead of contacting them directly, we were told to access their files to verify compliance. When I asked if that was legal, my manager said, "It's in the terms and conditions they agreed to." Most customers didn't know we could access their data anytime, and I realized privacy was just a selling point, not a reality. Story 93. I worked at a major gym chain, and here's a dirty secret. We intentionally made it hard to cancel memberships. The cancellation policy required customers to come in person, even if they'd signed up online. One man drove 2 hours to cancel because he'd moved to another state. My manager told me to offer him a free freeze on his account instead, knowing it would restart billing after a few months. He took the deal, thinking it saved him money, but he ended up paying more in the long run. Watching people jump through hoops to leave made me feel like we were trapping them. Story 94. I worked for a catering company that specialized in corporate events, and here's the truth. Those premium open bars clients paid thousands for? Most of the alcohol was bottom shelf, just poured into premium bottles. One time, a guest complimented the imported whiskey they were drinking. My manager whispered, "That's the cheapest bottle from the liquor store." When I asked why we couldn't just serve what was advertised, my manager said, "No one can tell after the first drink." Watching people pay for an illusion made me question the entire operation. Story 95. I worked for a popular hotel booking website, and here's a scam. The lowest price guarantee we offered often wasn't real. If a customer found a cheaper rate elsewhere, we'd claim it didn't qualify because of different terms. One time, a customer called about a room they found for $20 less on another site. My manager told me to say, "That price doesn't include all the same amenities." It did, but we still denied the refund. The customer was frustrated, but ended up sticking with our site. It made me realize how easily companies take advantage of convenience. Story 96. I worked at a large chain furniture store, and here's a truth that might surprise you. Those assembly-required products are designed to break down faster, so you'll come back to replace them. Once, a customer returned a desk they'd bought only a year earlier because it was falling apart. My manager told me to upsell them on a pricier model, saying, "This one's built to last longer." The truth? It was the same cheap materials with a slightly different design. The customer bought it anyway, and I realized the store was more about repeat business than quality. Story 97. I worked for a meal kit delivery service, and here's the scam. Most of the farm-fresh ingredients we shipped were actually just bulk produce from national suppliers. One time, a customer wrote in saying they loved how the carrots tasted like they came straight from the farm. My manager laughed and said, "They came straight from a warehouse." When I asked why we marketed it that way, he said, "People want to feel connected to their food. It's all about the story." Watching customers pay extra for packaging and marketing made me question everything about the job. Story 98. I worked in retail at a big electronics store, and here's the scam. The free tech support we offered was anything but free. Most issues we fixed involved suggesting new purchases, even when a cheaper repair was possible. One time, a customer brought in their laptop with a simple software issue. Instead of fixing it, my manager had me recommend an upgrade to a new model. The customer spent $800 they didn't need to, thinking it was their only option. I felt like we were taking advantage of people who trusted us. Story 99. I worked at a big box retailer, and here's the truth. The buy one, get one free deals are often just a way to clear out old stock. One time, we had a sale on laundry detergent, and the customer asked if the deal was really a good value. My manager told me to say, "It's a special promotion from the manufacturer." The truth? The detergent was being discontinued, and we were trying to empty the shelves before new inventory arrived. Watching customers think they were getting a bargain when we just needed space felt dishonest. Story 100. I worked for a luxury vacation rental service, and here's a secret. Most of the photos on our site were heavily edited or taken years ago. One time, a guest complained that their beachfront property didn't look anything like the pictures. My manager told me to say, "It's the same property, but seasonal changes can affect the appearance." The reality? The photos were taken 5 years earlier, before the area had been developed. The guest left a lukewarm review, but they still paid the premium price. It made me realize how much of the travel industry relies on smoke and mirrors. Story 101. I worked at a high-end clothing boutique, and here's the truth. The hand-sewn garments we sold for hundreds of dollars. Many were machine-stitched in bulk and just finished with a few hand-sewn details. One day, a customer raved about how much they appreciated the craftsmanship of their $800 dress. My manager said, "That's what sets us apart," while knowing it came from the same factory that produced lower-priced brands. Watching people pay for an illusion made me question the entire luxury market. Story 102. I worked at a major shipping company, and here's the catch. Those guaranteed delivery dates aren't actually guaranteed. If packages were delayed, we were instructed to blame unforeseen circumstances, even when the issue was just overbooking. One customer called, furious that their package hadn't arrived for a birthday party. My manager told me to offer a small refund but avoid admitting fault. The truth, their package had been sitting in a warehouse for 2 days because we prioritized higher-paying shipments. It felt wrong knowing they had no idea how rigged the system was. Story 103. I worked at a luxury fragrance counter, and here's the scam. Those exclusive perfumes we sold? They were just diluted versions of the same formulas available at discount retailers. Once, a customer asked why their $200 bottle smelled different than a $50 one they'd bought elsewhere. My manager said, "It's a unique formulation exclusive to us," which wasn't true. The only difference was the packaging and the higher alcohol content. Watching customers pay for the same product in a shinier bottle made me lose faith in luxury branding. Story 104. I worked in a call center for a major internet provider, and here's a dirty secret. When you call for a discount, we're trained to offer you the second best deal first. Only if you threaten to cancel do we give you the best rate. One day, a customer asked if they could get the same deal a new subscriber would. My manager told me to say, "That promotion is only available for new customers," even though I could have given them a similar discount. When they finally said they were leaving, we magically found a better rate. It felt like we were punishing loyalty instead of rewarding it. Story 105. I worked at a major grocery store chain, and here's the scam. Those fresh seafood displays? Most of the fish had been frozen for weeks and just thawed before being put out. One day, a customer complimented the just-caught salmon they were buying, saying they could taste the difference. My manager smiled and said, "That's the quality we're known for," even though the salmon had been sitting in our freezer for a month. Watching people pay premium prices for something that wasn't remotely fresh made me realize how much grocery stores rely on perception over reality. Story 106. I worked at a big box electronics store, and here's the truth. Those special financing options we offered were designed to trap people in debt. The 0% interest deals? They only stayed interest-free if you paid off the full balance on time. One customer came in asking why their $800 purchase turned into $1,200 after a year. My manager told me to say, "It's in the terms and conditions." The customer looked defeated, and I realized the financing wasn't about helping people. It was about squeezing as much money out of them as possible. Story 107. I worked at a high-end spa, and here's a secret. Many of the luxury treatments are just basic products with fancy names. Once, a customer paid $300 for a gold-infused facial, which was just a regular moisturizer mixed with a tiny amount of gold-colored powder. The customer left glowing, literally, and raved about how opulent the treatment was. My manager smiled and said, "People love feeling pampered." Watching someone pay so much for a placebo effect made me question the entire wellness industry. Story 108. I worked for a car dealership, and here's the scam. When we advertised low monthly payments, we stretched the loan terms to make it look affordable. One day, a customer was excited about getting a car for $300 a month, but when I looked at their paperwork, they'd be paying for 7 years. My manager told me to say, "This is a great option for keeping your payments low." The customer didn't realize how much they'd pay in interest over time. It made me feel like we were setting people up for financial traps, just to hit our quotas. Story 109. I worked at a chain pharmacy, and here's the truth. The essential vitamins we sold were often overpriced and unnecessary. One day, a customer asked if they really needed a $50 bottle of supplements. My manager told me to say, "These are formulated for optimal health." Later, I found out the same vitamins were available at half the price under a different label. Watching people spend extra for a product with a shinier bottle made me realize how much profit comes from fear-based marketing. Story 110. I worked in retail for a big-name fashion brand, and here's a dirty secret. The clearance rack often includes items that were never full price. We'd stock it with lower quality pieces made specifically for discount sales. One day, a customer asked why a shirt on clearance looked so poorly made compared to the rest of the store. My manager told me to say, "It's from last season's collection." The truth? It was produced cheaply to fill the clearance section. Watching people buy it, thinking they were getting a deal, made me feel like the whole system was rigged. Story 111. I worked at a high-end furniture showroom, and here's a scam. Those customizable sofas we sold for thousands of dollars? They weren't custom at all. We just offered a few fabric choices and called it bespoke. One customer spent hours selecting the perfect custom design for their living room. My manager whispered, "It's just one of our standard models with a different cover." The customer was thrilled, saying it felt unique, and I realized they were paying for a story, not the product. Story 112. I worked for a meal delivery app, and here's the truth. Drivers get penalized for declining orders, even if the distance doesn't make sense for the pay. Once I had to drive 20 miles for a $5 delivery. When I asked my manager why we couldn't set fairer rates, they said, "The algorithm prioritizes customer convenience, not driver profits." Meanwhile, customers complained about rising fees, not knowing most of the money went to the app, not the drivers. It felt like everyone was losing, except the company. Story 113. I worked at a luxury hotel, and here's a secret. The complimentary upgrades we offered were often rooms with hidden issues. Once, we upgraded a guest to a suite with a stunning view of the rooftop air conditioning units. The guest called down, upset, and my manager told me to say, "It's one of our most exclusive rooms with unique character." They stayed, thinking they got a great deal, and I realized how much of the hospitality industry was about spinning flaws into features. Story 114. I worked in retail at a chain bookstore, and here's the scam. Those employee recommendations on the shelves? Most of them were chosen by corporate, not the staff. One time, a customer asked if I had read a particular book from the recommendation display. I hadn't even heard of it but was told to say, "It's one of my favorites." Watching customers trust those recommendations, thinking they were personal, made me feel like we were misleading them. Story 115. I worked at a fast food chain that advertised never frozen beef. Here's the catch. The patties were technically refrigerated, but they arrived pre-cooked and vacuum-sealed. One day, a customer raved about how much fresher our burgers tasted compared to other places. My manager smirked and said, "That's the power of branding." I realized then how much of the industry relied on bending the truth to sound better. 116. I worked at a high-end gym, the kind that charges a monthly fee equivalent to most people's car payments. The place was advertised as state-of-the-art, but here's the secret. Most of the equipment was outdated, and we barely maintained it. One time, a treadmill belt completely wore out and started slipping, but instead of fixing it, my manager told me to put an out-of-order sign on it and move it to the corner. A week later, corporate came for an inspection, so my manager had us remove the sign and wipe the machine down to make it look operational. When a member tried to use it that afternoon, they nearly tripped. We quickly put the sign back up, but no one cared enough to get it repaired. My manager's excuse? "We're investing in a new machine next quarter." The treadmill stayed broken for another 2 months. Watching people pay ridiculous fees for a gym that cut corners at every opportunity made me realize how much we overcharged for the illusion of luxury. In 1917, I worked for a luxury travel agency, and one of our most popular packages was a tailor-made safari experience. Clients would pay tens of thousands for a fully customized trip. But here's the truth. Most of the itineraries were pre-designed templates. We'd make minor changes, like swapping out one lodge for another, and call it customization. One client paid an extra $5,000 to have a private guide, who in reality was just a standard group guide assigned to them solo. The guide didn't even know they were supposed to tailor the experience and ended up using the same script they gave to group tours. The clients came back raving about how personalized it felt, and my boss patted himself on the back for upselling them. Watching people shell out so much money for what was essentially the standard package made me question the entire luxury travel industry. Story 118. I worked at a major coffee chain, and the seasonal drinks were always a huge draw. But here's the secret. The ingredients for most of those limited time-only drinks were available all year. Once, a regular customer asked if I could make their favorite holiday latte in the summer. I knew we had all the syrups and toppings in the back, but my manager said, "Tell them it's not possible. Scarcity drives demand." Later, when the same customer came in for a different drink, I made their holiday favorite as a surprise. They were thrilled and tipped me generously, saying they wished the company wasn't so strict about seasonal items. Watching them leave happy made me feel good, but I knew I couldn't do that for everyone. The company would rather miss a sale than admit the limited time label was just a marketing ploy. Story 119. I worked for a popular pet store chain, and here's a secret. The specialized diets we sold for cats and dogs were often just rebranded versions of standard food. One time, a customer came in looking for a specific type of food for their elderly dog. They had been buying the same $70 bag for years and wanted to know what made it so much better than the $30 alternatives. I checked the ingredients and saw they were nearly identical, down to the protein percentages and added supplements. When I mentioned this to my manager, they said, "Just tell them the higher price reflects the research and care that goes into our brand." The truth? The same factory produced both versions, but we charged more for the specialized label. The customer left happy with their $70 bag, thinking they were giving their dog the best, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were taking advantage of people's love for their pets. Story 120. I worked at a chain pharmacy, and the most eye-opening part of the job was learning how much of the pricing was completely arbitrary. One day, a customer came in looking for cold medicine, and they were shocked to see the name-brand version cost $20 more than the store-brand option. They asked me if the extra cost was worth it. My manager overheard and quickly jumped in, saying, "The name brand is formulated for faster relief." The truth? Both boxes contained the exact same active ingredients, manufactured in the same factory, with only the packaging differing. After the customer left, I asked my manager why we couldn't just be honest about it. They said, "People trust the brand name. If they're willing to pay for it, why stop them?" Watching customers spend extra money for no real benefit made me realize how much of retail relies on keeping people uninformed. Story 121. I worked at a luxury car dealership, and here's a secret. Most of the certified pre-owned cars aren't as rigorously inspected as we claim. The certification checklist was supposed to include over 100 points, but in reality, we often skipped over major areas just to get cars onto the lot faster. One time, a customer bought a certified pre-owned car that was advertised as "like new." A week later, they came back complaining about a strange noise in the engine. When the mechanics checked it, they found several parts that should have been replaced during the inspection. My manager told me to explain that wear and tear wasn't covered under the certification. The customer was furious, but they ended up paying for the repairs out of pocket. My manager shrugged and said, "Once they buy, it's not our problem." Watching people trust a certification that didn't mean much made me realize how deceptive the entire process was. Story 122. I worked at a high-end catering company that specialized in corporate events. Clients would pay a fortune for gourmet handmade dishes, but the truth was that much of the food came pre-prepared. One of our most popular items, the signature truffle pasta, was just store-bought pasta with truffle oil drizzled on top. At one event, a client asked me if the pasta was made fresh in our kitchen. My manager stepped in and said, "Everything we serve is crafted with the finest ingredients." Later, I saw the same pasta brand in a local supermarket for a fraction of what we charged. The kicker? Guests raved about how luxurious and unique the meal was. Watching people gush over what was essentially dressed-up store-bought food made me question the value of luxury experiences. Story 123. I worked for a subscription box company, and here's the scam. Most of the exclusive, hand-picked items we sent out were just leftovers from bulk orders we got at a discount. One month, we included a premium skincare serum that we claimed was valued at $80. When I checked the supplier's website, the same product was being sold for $10 in clearance. A customer emailed in, thrilled about how luxurious the serum felt, and my manager replied, "We're glad you're enjoying our carefully curated selection." I asked why we didn't just be upfront about sourcing. My manager laughed and said, "People love feeling like they're getting a deal. They don't want the truth." That's when I realized the business wasn't about delivering value. It was about creating the illusion of value. Story 124. I worked at a popular gym chain that advertised state-of-the-art facilities and top-notch personal training. Here's the truth. Most of the trainers weren't certified, and the equipment was rarely updated. One time, a treadmill broke down mid-use, and instead of replacing it, my manager told me to slap an out-of-order sign on it and focus on selling new memberships. A member came in for a free consultation with one of our trainers, expecting expert advice. The trainer gave them a generic workout plan they'd copied from the internet. The member signed up for a $1,000 package, thinking they were getting personalized help. Later, I asked why we didn't require trainers to have real credentials. My manager shrugged and said, "They just need to know enough to make it look good." Watching people invest in their health and get so little in return made me realize how exploitative the fitness industry could be. Story 125. I worked at a big box electronics store, and here's a scam you should know. Those protection plans we sold were designed to make money, not help customers. The plans rarely covered anything beyond basic manufacturing defects, and even then, claims were often denied. One customer came in with a laptop they'd purchased along with a protection plan. The screen had cracked, and they assumed it would be covered. My manager told me to say, "Physical damage isn't included unless caused by a manufacturing issue." The customer was visibly upset and asked why they'd been sold a plan that didn't help. My manager just smiled and said, "It's in the terms and conditions." After they left, I realized how often we relied on fine print to avoid honoring promises. Watching people spend extra money for false peace of mind made me feel like the entire system was rigged. Story 126. I worked at a luxury hotel chain, and here's a secret. Those personalized experiences we promised, most were pre-scripted packages with a few minor tweaks. One time, a guest requested a unique dinner experience by the beach, and my manager assured them we'd create something custom just for you. In reality, we used the same setup we'd done a dozen times before. Pre-made lanterns, generic floral arrangements, and a standard menu. The only customization was adding their names to a printed menu. The guests were thrilled and called it the most unique dinner they'd ever had. When I asked why we marketed it as personalized, my manager said, "People don't need new, just new to them." It made me realize how much of the hospitality industry relied on selling recycled ideas as bespoke experiences. Story 27. I worked for a high-profile event planning company, and one of our biggest moneymakers was weddings. Couples paid astronomical prices for one-of-a-kind designs, but most of the decor came from a shared inventory we reused for multiple events. One bride wanted a completely original theme and paid an extra $10,000 for a package labeled as exclusive. My manager directed us to pull out decor from a previous wedding, changing only the color scheme. The bride and groom were ecstatic, saying the event was exactly how they envisioned it. Later, I found out another couple was being sold the same exclusive package for their wedding the following month. It made me realize how much of the industry was about maximizing profits by rebranding old ideas. Story 128. I worked at a large chain coffee shop, and here's something most people don't know. The pastries displayed in the case, they're usually a day old. We'd store unsold items overnight and put them back out the next morning, labeling them as freshly baked. One customer raved about how much they loved our muffins, saying they could taste the freshness. My manager nodded and said, "We use the highest quality ingredients." In reality, those muffins had been sitting in the freezer for weeks before being baked and then reused until they sold. When I asked why we didn't just be honest, my manager said, "People want to believe it's fresh. It's good for business." Watching customers pay premium prices for leftover pastries made me question everything about the brand's image. Alright. Story 129. I worked at a big-name retail store, and here's a scam we pulled regularly. The price match guarantee was deliberately designed to be difficult to use. Customers had to provide proof of the lower price, and even then, there were countless exclusions. One customer found a TV online for $200 less and asked us to match the price. My manager told me to explain that the competitor's offer didn't qualify because it was part of a limited-time sale. The customer argued, but eventually gave up and paid full price. Afterward, my manager said, "Most people won't fight it. It's all about looking like we're fair, not actually being fair." Watching people believe in policies that weren't designed to help them made me realize how manipulative retail could be. Kinta. Story 130. I worked for a luxury skincare company, and here's the truth. Many of the expensive products we sold were just rebranded versions of cheaper lines. One of our miracle serums cost $300 but had nearly identical ingredients to a $30 drugstore product. A customer once asked me what made the serum worth the price. My manager told me to say, "It's formulated with rare botanicals and advanced technology." In reality, the formula came from the same supplier as our budget line. The only difference was the packaging and marketing. When I asked why we couldn't just sell the affordable version, my manager said, "People equate price with quality." Watching people spend so much on a product that wasn't special made me feel like the entire industry was built on deception. Story 131. I worked for a chain fast food restaurant, and here's the truth. The freshly grilled chicken we advertised wasn't fresh or grilled. It came pre-cooked, frozen, and was reheated on a flat-top grill to give it those iconic marks. One day, a customer complimented me on how perfectly cooked their chicken was and asked if we made it to order. My manager nodded and said, "Absolutely, we pride ourselves on freshness." Later, I asked why we couldn't just be honest about it. My manager laughed and said, "People pay for the idea of fresh, not the reality." After that, I couldn't look at the menu the same way. Watching people rave about something that was essentially reheated made me realize how powerful marketing could be. Story 132. I worked at a popular online retailer, and one of our most advertised perks was 2-day shipping. But here's the catch. It rarely took 2 days. If we didn't have an item in a nearby warehouse, we'd ship it from farther away, and it would take days longer. One customer called, furious that their item hadn't arrived as promised. My manager told me to blame unexpected carrier delays, even though the real issue was that we didn't prioritize their order. When the customer asked for a refund on the shipping, my manager refused, saying, "It's not our fault." Watching people pay extra for a promise we couldn't keep made me question the ethics of the whole system. Story 133. I worked for a large car rental company, and here's a dirty secret. Those clean and sanitized cars you rent? Most were barely wiped down between customers. Once I was instructed to prepare a car for the next renter in under 5 minutes. I wiped down the visible surfaces and sprayed air freshener, but there was no time for a thorough cleaning. The next renter picked up the car, raving about how spotless it looked. My manager smiled and said, "That's the kind of service we're known for." In reality, we cut corners every chance we got, especially during busy seasons. It made me wonder how many other companies prioritize appearances over actual cleanliness. Story 134. I worked at a chain grocery store, and here's the truth. Those locally sourced labels on produce, they're often just slapped on anything grown within a 500-mile radius. One time, a customer asked if a batch of peaches was really from a nearby farm. My manager said, "Of course," even though the shipment came from a commercial farm 3 states away. Later, I asked why we were allowed to label them as local. My manager said, "The definition of local is flexible." Watching customers pay extra for what they thought was a fresh, local product made me realize how easily the term could be manipulated for profit. Story 135. I worked at a luxury watch store, and here's the scam. Those limited edition timepieces we sold for tens of thousands of dollars weren't limited at all. We'd hold back stock to create artificial scarcity, then re-release them months later at the same price. One customer rushed in, excited to buy a watch they'd seen in an ad. My manager told them it was the last one available, even though we had 10 more in the back. The customer walked out thrilled, thinking they'd scored something exclusive. After they left, my manager said, "Scarcity sells. People love feeling like they got something rare." It made me realize how much of luxury retail relies on creating demand out of thin air. 136. I worked at a high-end retail store known for its luxury handbags. Here's the secret. Most of the so-called leather bags were actually made from synthetic materials with just a thin leather coating. Customers would pay thousands, thinking they were getting a durable, handmade product. One day, a customer asked why their $2,000 bag felt so light compared to others they owned. My manager quickly stepped in and said, "That's the beauty of premium craftsmanship. It's designed for comfort and ease." In reality, the materials were chosen to cut costs. Later, I found out that the same supplier made similar bags for discount retailers. The only difference? Our brand stamped its logo on them and quadrupled the price. Watching people feel proud of their investment while knowing the truth made me question the entire luxury industry. Story 137. I worked at a popular ride-sharing company's support team, and here's the scam. When drivers reported dangerous passengers, the company almost always sided with the riders to avoid losing business. One driver contacted us after being threatened by a rider who refused to leave their car. They provided evidence through the in-app recording, but instead of taking action, we offered the driver a $50 credit as an apology and left the rider's account active. When I asked why we didn't ban riders with repeated complaints, my supervisor said, "The riders bring in the revenue. Drivers are replaceable." Watching people risk their safety for a system that didn't care about them made me feel like we were prioritizing profits over basic human decency. 10. Story 138. I worked at a luxury cosmetics brand, and here's a truth no one wants to hear. Many of the revolutionary products we sold were just old formulas, repackaged with new marketing. One time, we launched a $200 anti-aging cream that was nearly identical to a discontinued $50 product. A customer raved about how much better the new cream felt and asked if the formula had changed. My manager said, "We've enhanced it with cutting-edge ingredients," even though the only change was a slightly different scent. When I asked why we couldn't just be transparent, my manager said, "People love the idea of innovation. They don't need to know the details." Watching customers trust the brand and pay so much for the same old thing made me question how much of the beauty industry was smoke and mirrors. Bang! Story 139. I worked at a major airline, and here's something most travelers don't know. The priority boarding fees we charged were often meaningless. One day, a passenger paid extra for priority boarding, but the gate agents didn't enforce the boarding groups due to a delay. The passenger complained, saying they'd paid specifically to board early, and my manager told me to say, "Your fee guarantees access to the priority line, not the boarding order." It wasn't true. We just didn't want to refund the money. After the flight left, my manager laughed and said, "People love paying for privileges, even if they don't get them." Watching customers pay for a promise we had no intention of keeping made me question every upsell we offered. Imon Story 140. I worked for a subscription box company, and here's the scam. Many of the handcrafted items we included were cheap imports that we marked up as exclusive. One month, we sent out a handmade ceramic mug that was advertised as being from a local artisan. In reality, it was mass-produced overseas and cost us less than $2 per piece. A customer emailed, thrilled about how unique the mug felt, and my manager replied with a heartfelt thank you note about supporting small businesses. When I asked why we lied about the source, my manager said, "People love the story more than the truth." Watching people fall for the marketing made me realize how easily companies manipulate consumers into believing in false narratives. 141. I worked at a high-end home appliance store, and here's the truth. Many of the energy-efficient models we sold weren't actually as efficient as advertised. The energy ratings were based on ideal conditions, which rarely matched how customers used the appliances. One day, a customer asked if their new dishwasher would really save them as much money on their energy bill as the label claimed. My manager smiled and said, "Absolutely, if you use it according to the manufacturer's guidelines." What they didn't say was that most people would never use it under those specific conditions, like running it only half full and on eco mode every time. Later, I found out that the energy savings we promoted were calculated in controlled environments, not real homes. Watching people pay extra for features that didn't deliver in real life made me question how much of the industry was just clever marketing. Story 142. I worked at a luxury wedding venue, and here's a scam. Those exclusive packages we sold were often just standard services with inflated prices. One couple paid an extra $5,000 for a custom floral arch, which was actually rented from a vendor we worked with regularly. The couple was thrilled with how beautiful it looked, calling it a one-of-a-kind centerpiece. My manager nodded and said, "We work hard to bring your vision to life." In reality, the same arch was used at 3 other weddings that month, just with different flowers. When I asked why we didn't just be upfront about the rentals, my manager said, "Weddings are emotional purchases. People want to believe it's all uniquely theirs." It made me realize how much of the wedding industry profits off of dreams and illusions. Story 143. I worked at a fast fashion retailer, and here's a secret. Many of the clothes labeled as sustainable weren't made sustainably at all. We'd launch eco-friendly collections that use slightly less fabric or lower quality materials to reduce costs, not for environmental reasons. One customer asked what made a $40 dress from the sustainable line better than a $20 one from the regular collection. My manager told me to say, "It's made with more responsible sourcing practices." In reality, the dresses were produced in the same factories with no significant difference in environmental impact. When I pointed this out, my manager said, "People just want to feel like they're doing the right thing." Watching customers pay extra for greenwashing made me realize how shallow corporate sustainability efforts often are. Story 144. I worked for a high-end tech retailer, and here's the scam. Those extended warranties we sold were full of exclusions that made them almost impossible to use. One customer bought a $2,000 laptop and added a $300 warranty, thinking it would cover any issue. A few months later, they came back with a cracked screen, only to find out physical damage wasn't included. My manager told me to say, "It's in the terms and conditions," knowing full well most people never read the fine print. The customer left angry, calling the warranty a ripoff, and my manager just shrugged and said, "They should have read it." After that, I stopped offering warranties altogether because I couldn't keep selling something I knew was a scam. Story 145. I worked at a premium pet boarding facility, and here's the truth. The luxury suites for pets weren't as luxurious as they seemed. The rooms were small, and while they were advertised as spacious and comfortable, we packed in as many as we could during busy seasons. One owner called to check on their dog, and my manager told me to say, "They're enjoying their private suite and daily walks." In reality, the dog was sharing a run with two others, and the walks were quick bathroom breaks. When I asked why we couldn't just be honest about the capacity, my manager said, "People want to believe their pets are being pampered." Watching owners pay hundreds for services we didn't fully deliver made me realize how much of the pet care industry is built on appearances. Story 146. I worked at a big-name department store, and here's a scam we pulled often. Those special edition products we advertised for the holidays were usually just old inventory repackaged with seasonal branding. One year, we sold limited edition holiday cookware, which was the same cookware we sold year-round, but with snowflakes painted on the box. A customer asked if the cookware was better quality than the regular version. My manager told me to say, "It's made exclusively for the holiday season with enhanced durability." The truth? The only difference was the packaging. Later, I found out that these seasonal products were priced 20% higher, and people bought them thinking they were getting something unique. Watching customers fall for the marketing made me realize how easily businesses capitalize on holiday sentiment. Story 147. I worked at a major call center for a bank, and here's a dirty secret. The fraud protection services we offered were often just upsells for basic monitoring features you could do yourself. Once, a customer called, worried about fraudulent charges on their account. My manager instructed me to offer them a $15 a month fraud protection plan instead of addressing the issue directly. The customer agreed, thinking the plan would prevent future fraud, but in reality, all it did was send alerts, something the bank's free app already did. After the call, I asked my manager why we didn't just help the customer without selling them something. They said, "Upselling is the priority. Solving problems is secondary." That day, I realized how little these plans actually helped. Story 148. I worked at a luxury boutique hotel, and here's the truth. Those chef's tasting menus we offered for hundreds of dollars were often pre-prepared meals, reheated before serving. One evening, a couple raved about how impeccable and fresh their meal was, asking if they could thank the chef personally. My manager smiled and said, "The chef is busy preparing the next course," while the kitchen staff reheated dishes from a pre-packaged shipment. When I asked why we didn't make everything fresh, my manager said, "It's about the presentation, not the process." Watching guests pay so much for a microwaved meal made me question what people were really paying for. Story 149. I worked at a tech startup that marketed cutting-edge software. But here's the truth. Much of our product was outsourced and barely tested before launch. One client signed a massive contract, expecting a robust system tailored to their business needs. In reality, we repurposed an old template and made minor adjustments to make it look custom. When the client complained about bugs, my boss told me to say, "This is a beta version, and updates are on the way." The truth? We had no timeline for fixes, and most of the issues stemmed from skipping testing to save money. Watching clients trust our promises made me uncomfortable, knowing how little effort we actually put into delivering quality. Story 150. I worked at a chain grocery store, and here's a secret. The manager's special deals in the meat section were often nearing their expiration date. One time, a customer asked why the discounted steaks looked slightly gray. My manager instructed me to say, "That's just from the packaging. It's still perfectly fresh." In reality, those steaks were at the end of their shelf life and needed to be sold quickly. We marked them as special to make them seem like a great deal, and most customers bought them without questioning it. Watching people believe they were getting high-quality meat for a bargain made me realize how much grocery stores profit off of careful wording. Story 151. I worked at a premium florist, and here's a secret. Those handcrafted bouquets we advertised were often pre-made arrangements shipped from a warehouse. One Valentine's Day, We were so overwhelmed with orders that we didn't have time to customize anything. Instead, we unpacked bulk arrangements, added a few extra flowers, and charged customers triple the price. A customer came in to pick up a $200 bouquet and asked how long it had taken to arrange. My manager smiled and said, "Every bouquet is created with care and attention to detail." In reality, the arrangement had been sitting in a refrigerated truck for days. Later, I asked why we didn't just be honest about using pre-made bouquets. My manager replied, "People pay for the story, not the flowers." Watching people believe they were getting something bespoke made me question the ethics of our pricing. Story 152. I worked for a well-known subscription meal kit service, and here's the truth. Many of the recipes were designed to cut corners on quality while maximizing profit. Once, a customer wrote in to praise the farm-fresh chicken in their kit, saying it tasted better than anything they'd ever bought in a store. The chicken, like most of our protein, came from the cheapest supplier available, and it was frozen before shipping. When I asked why we didn't source better ingredients, my manager said, "Customers can't tell the difference if the seasoning is good." Watching people rave about meals that were far from premium made me realize how much the service relied on clever branding rather than quality. Story 153. I worked at a big box electronics store, and here's a scam we ran often. Those free installation deals weren't really free. Customers would buy a TV or home theater system expecting professional setup, but the installers were incentivized to upsell expensive accessories like cables and surge protectors. One customer was thrilled about getting a free installation for their new TV. By the end of the visit, they'd spent $300 on necessary cables and mounts that were far overpriced. When I asked the installer why they pushed so hard, they said, "We don't get commission on the install, so this is how we make up for it." Watching people trust us to provide honest service made me uncomfortable knowing how much they were being upsold unnecessarily. Story 154. I worked at a luxury pet supply store, and here's the truth. Those organic, grain-free pet foods we sold weren't as high quality as advertised. One day, a customer asked why the $80 bag of food they bought had the same ingredients as a $30 bag from a regular store. My manager told me to explain that the more expensive brand used premium sources, even though I knew they were made in the same factory. Later, I found out that the manufacturer paid us to promote the pricier product over the cheaper one. Watching customers spend so much on food they thought was healthier made me realize how easily people are misled by fancy labels. Story 155. I worked at a travel agency specializing in luxury cruises, and here's a secret. Those all-inclusive packages we sold were anything but. One couple paid for an all-inclusive package, thinking it covered everything, only to find out excursions, drinks, and even Wi-Fi were extra. When they called to complain, my manager told me to say, "All-inclusive refers to the core experience, and optional extras are available for a personalized touch." In reality, the only thing included was the basic room and meals. The couple ended up spending thousands more on what they thought was already covered. After seeing how many customers fell for this tactic, I realized the travel industry thrives on vague promises and hidden costs. Story 156. I worked at a high-end home goods store, and here's a dirty little secret. The limited edition artisan candles we sold for $60 each were mass-produced overseas for pennies. The only thing artisanal about them was the label. One day, a customer asked what made the candles so special. My manager told me to say, "Each one is crafted in small batches to ensure quality." In reality, they came in bulk shipments, and we swapped out the generic labels for our premium branding. When I questioned why we couldn't just sell them at a reasonable price, my manager said, "People want to feel like they're buying something exclusive. The price tells them it's worth it." Watching customers spend so much on something so ordinary made me realize how much of the luxury market is built on clever storytelling. Story 157. I worked at a major retail pharmacy, and here's the truth. The sale prices on many products were just the regular prices with inflated original tags. One time, a customer bought a pack of vitamins on special for $14.99, thinking they'd saved $5. Later, I noticed the same vitamins were priced at $14.99 the week before the sale, but the original price had been raised temporarily to $19.99 for the promotion. When I asked my manager about it, they said, "It's just how retail works. Sales drive volume." Watching customers feel good about getting a deal that didn't exist made me realize how deceptive retail pricing strategies can be. Story 158. I worked for a luxury real estate company, and here's the scam. Many of the properties we marketed as move-in ready were far from it. One client bought a multi-million-dollar home based on stunning photos and a glowing description. When they moved in, they discovered plumbing issues, poorly finished floors, and outdated wiring. My manager told me to reassure them by saying, "These are just minor adjustments that come with any property." In reality, we knew about these problems but didn't disclose them because the market was so competitive. Watching people spend their life savings on homes that didn't live up to the hype made me realize how much of real estate is about appearances over substance. Are. Story 159. I worked at a subscription snack box company, and here's the truth. Many of the exclusive international snacks we offered were just repackaged domestic items. One month, we advertised a limited edition Japanese candy, but it was actually a common brand available at local Asian grocery stores. A customer emailed, excited about how unique the candy was, saying they couldn't wait to share it with their friends. My manager replied with a thank you note about supporting global artisans, even though the product wasn't imported. When I asked why we didn't source authentic international snacks, my manager said, "It's too expensive, and most people don't know the difference." Watching people pay for the illusion of exclusivity made me feel like the entire business model was built on deception. Story 160. I worked at a popular ride-sharing company support team, and here's something frustrating. The company prioritizes passenger complaints over driver safety. One driver reported a passenger who had been intoxicated and verbally abusive during the ride. Instead of banning the passenger, we issued a generic warning email. When I asked why we didn't take stronger action, my supervisor said, "We can't afford to lose customers. It's easier to replace drivers." The same passenger had multiple complaints on their account, but was still allowed to book rides. It made me realize how little value the company placed on the people who actually kept the service running. Drivers were treated as expendable, while difficult customers were coddled to keep profits flowing.